Namaste to all of you. A very warm welcome to this evening's Zoom call. Um, uh, Today, as you all are aware, we have Sri Jagannathan Ji. Jagannathan Ji, as you are all aware, he is a veteran journalist of 35 years of experience. The kind of work that he has done would probably consume the whole of an hour if I have to really introduce him. But then we all know that he is now doing a wonderful job in running this magazine or news portal and news hub, which is Swarajya. Friends, we had Shafali Vaidya ji a few days back, who spoke about what things are happening in the social media, especially in Twitter. Yesterday we had Aditya Raj Kaul ji, who represents the electronic media or the TV. And today we have Jagannathan ji in the core print media. So he has been with many reputed institutions, journalistic houses before. And today he is running Swarajya. Swarajya, by definition, in the description itself, they very clearly said they're right of center. So, this binary of right versus left, if you have to look at it, when we describe somebody as right, opposite of that doesn't necessarily need to be left. The opposite of right has to also be wrong. So let's not call them leftists, let's call them wrongists. So when we are rightists or we are right, they are wrong. So that's how we put the day's title today, that the people who are in the right direction, a very professionally run, dependable, credible news channel, news portal like Swarajya, faces huge amount of pressure, backlash, and challenges from the wrongists. So we know the portals like Wire, Quint, and so many others, they get huge amount of funding, where from God knows. Whereas magazine like Swarajya is just about managing compared to these people. Whether they have readership or not is different, but they're rabble rousers, they're rabidly anti-India and anti-Hindu in many respects, anti-government probably, that's given. So given all these things, if we as readers want to see the true news beyond the cacophony and the shoutings and the rumblings, we are heavily dependent on Swarajya, and Jagannathan ji's team and his work is something which is really commendable. And so we are very happy to have him today with us. It's very difficult for us to catch somebody like him because he's constantly doing a lot of work in terms of producing quality content for us. Before I let the floor to him, I would request all of you to kindly subscribe to Swarajya magazine. Please understand that the people on this side of the ideological divide, we are very happy to do a lot of things. We expect people to do things free of cost to us, but there is a cost. There is expenditure. Things don't come easily. When those wrongists are able to get huge amount of funding from shady sources, at least we have a moral obligation and responsibility to support and defend people who are talking the right language. So I would request all of you to kindly subscribe to Swarajya magazine, and probably when you have to give gift to somebody, kindly gift 1 year or 2 year subscription of magazine to your relatives and friends. Similarly, I would also request all of you to kindly like, share, or subscribe to our social media platforms, which Dheeraj would be putting out in the chat box pretty soon. As always, we will be muting all the chats. So when Jagannathan ji is talking, we do not have any disturbance. Once his talk is over, then we will open up the chat. So, you can converse and can ask questions. So thanks a lot for all of you for today evening's presence and your support. Jagannathan ji, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Girdhar ji, for that lovely introduction. I'm grateful for that. And also the plug for Swarajya. I think if a lot of people support it, that will help us, because we do not get the kind of corporate funding that the likes of the Wire and all will get. I'll start with one of the points you made. Basically, that this right-left binary actually doesn't make any sense. because these are French Revolution terms, where in the legislative assembly, the old aristocracy and landed interests used to sit to the right of the speaker, and to the left were the new emerging classes, the middle classes, the people who are trying to merchant, people who are trying to create business. In a sense, the people sitting on the left were the new capitalist class, whom we will today call right. And the people who are actually sitting on the right were the old fuddy-duddies. So it's a bit mistake to use it. Today, of course, our enemies happily call us right because they can stick all kinds of label on the word right and say that, okay, they are the most backward looking, most terrible, most bigoted, those kind of labels are being stuck. So we should steer away from binaries, certainly. And to use more dharmic terminology, I would say the opposite of right is not necessarily wrong. It might be not right or a shade of not right, because often our choices are in the gray areas where we have to choose between greater good and lesser good, greater evil and lesser evil, as all our epics, whether it's in the Ramayana or Mahabharata, show. So I think we need to move away from complete black and white binaries, because it is not useful in any one situation. But yeah, we can, and also look at this. Today people call, many of you might be linked to the Sangha. This is called a right-wing organization. But in the left, many of the things that the Sangha would stand for would be considered left. Like, you have the biggest trade union is linked to the Sangha. Many in the Sangha, for example, oppose GM crops. These are all left-wing issues in the West. Here we are calling it right-wing, which is ridiculous. So I think we need to get away from that right-left terminology and move to more dharmic thing where, say, something is right, something is less right, something is more right. That can happen. But there's that. So to come back straight directly to the media issues that I want to talk about, I'll start with 2 or 3 anecdotes and tell you where we are in terms of this thing. Okay. About 3 years back, people like Azim Premji and certain other businessmen set up what they call an independent and public spirited media foundation and gave it something probably of the amount of about 100 crores, So we thought maybe they wanted independent and public spirited media. They wanted to fund it. So we went there and said that, can you help us? We just got started. We would help with some funding. Okay. So first year they said, absolutely not. You already have equity, some equity of your own and all that. So they don't come to us. Next year, but very soon after we went, the Wire guys approached them. And they said, look, we can't run unless you give us a grant. And they immediately sanctioned 8 crores. Okay. Now look at the scale. 8 crores is something given overnight to some guy who goes and says, look, I can't run it without your funding, and so you do it. Okay. Now I could have well put up a tearjerker, but we are people who like to stand on our feet. We go only with dignity. We said we can do that. So next year when we approached them, they said, like, look, you're given to all these guys. I think those fellows felt guilty because they wanted to show that they're neutral. And therefore, they knew that if you don't fund somebody or the other from the right, they'll be called as left wing. Therefore, they actually thought that, okay, let me try and give some funding to them. And over the next 2 years, they deliberately asked us to focus only on issues that they wanted us to issue. They're like things like, say, sanitation, hygiene, those kind of issues, which are neither left nor right issues, right? We did it. We're happy to do all those stories because those are vital for the country. And they gave us about a maximum about 50 lakhs. This is what they did. Okay. Now they can happily say that, oh, we are neutral. We are given left and right, but they basically fund left. And we are like the token right, which gets some peanuts because it solves their conscience. So that's one thing. Sometime later, another truly a well-wisher, a businessman, was very keen to fund us. But he said something, I cannot help you directly. I don't want my name to come anywhere in where Swarajya is there. I'll try and route some kind of advertising to you once in a while, but make sure that you don't make it. I asked him, what is it? Look, if you want us to succeed, why are you hiding from us? Huh? He said, look, you don't know. If tomorrow there is this was in before 2019 elections. He said, tomorrow in 2019, UPA comes back to power, they will come after us with a ton of bricks. Okay. Now, I don't want to be seen as having supported Swarajya. They will come and destroy my business. This is what we are up against. And so I will just say basically, oh, no, once in a while they came and asked for an ad, I gave it. I don't support them. That is what they want to say. That is their cover story, though he would have been happy to give us more money to help us. So this is the situation in which the right functions. The question really to ask is, why is business of any kind more happy to fund, say, left-wing publications, anti-national publications, publications with a very anti-Hindu, anti-dharmic stand? Why are they more keen to do that? I'll tell you why it happens. The reason is in the second incident I told you about. The point is, businessmen are quite happy with us because broadly we support pro-business policies. We want businesses to do the right thing. We want less regulation. We want to make sure that they do the right things for people. They employ more people. So we anyway give them support regardless of whether they fund us or not. In the case of the left, they find that they need protection from them because they can destroy your business by, because as you know, socialist thinking is predominant in this country. So anytime they can just destroy your business by saying, we are going to make policies, we are going to make sure that nobody becomes rich. That's the kind of nonsense that they will talk. So the point is, they need protection from left, which is why an Ambani, for example, is happy to put 450 to 500 crores indirectly into NDTV, fund an Indian Express, fund many other things. All these publications easily get funding from big business. No, don't forget, during Ramnath Goenka's time, Indian Express went hammer and tongs at Ambani. But Ambani was happy to fund them later, largely because I think it provides them protection. It means that in future, they will not attack you. So it saves your business. Whereas in our case, we are saying we want to trust business. We want our businesses to grow. We want our small business to grow. So we are anyway supporting them. So they don't see the need for honest support. They would rather silence the dishonest antagonism. That is the reason why businessmen prefer to support left publications, because that gives, it's like a protection money. You say, you shut up, I'll give you money. This is what it is, right? So now this is the unfair basis on which we have to fight for funding. The second thing is we need to understand the structure of media, whether print or TV or anything. Most media publications, whether digital or print or TV, are on the borderline of viability, if not unviable at all. You know, a Times of India copy costs 20 rupees a day to produce, but they recover less than 2 or 3 rupees per copy, right? So 17, 18 rupees in order to make it, they have to make it through other sources, which means largely advertising. And at a time when advertising is going to be bad, and at a time when, let's say, other forms of money are not going to happen, you're not going to be viable. And since viability is always an issue, it's easy for big businesses who want to keep you quiet to help you with advertising and direct how you should be covering what issue. So in a sense, media by definition is compromised, largely because they need funding, they're unviable, largely unviable. And there was a study some years back, they found that nearly 30 to 35% of all media houses are directly linked to political parties. You know, you've seen that in Andhra, Sakshi belongs to Jagan Reddy, Jagan Mohan, you know, Inadu is close to Ramoji Rao, in DMK, Sun TV and all are DMK. In Kerala, you know, Manorama is a little more, whatever it is. You know, you have Sakal, which is Sharad Pawar's link. You have Lokmat, which is more Congress oriented. Every single publication, media house is actually politically compromised. So this is, and that is how they get the money, because they support a political party and get money through multiple means when that party is in power, and even when it is not in power, because politicians help each other out in this way. When it comes to looting the country, they are happy to cooperate with each other. That's how it works, right? So this is the structure of the media in which we like Swarajya have to function. And in fact, some days back, somebody, I think, asked me through a WhatsApp, why don't you make it free so that it is more popularized? I said that, look, I will have to shut down in 3 months if I do not seek subscriptions, because that's my only source of revenue. And I have to keep a certain minimum establishment in place. I have to keep that because we do not have too much advertising or anything. And advertising comes at a very low rates. So it's very, very difficult. So those are the reasons why I said we need to keep subscription, because we know that at all times we can keep the website functioning at least up to a certain minimum level. And in good times we can do better, in bad times we can do little less. That's about it. So we got to look at that. So that's how it works. Now I'll come to the see, the deep state in India and abroad is very closely linked. The deep state is all those people outside, people like bureaucracy, the police, the the intelligence agencies and all. They're very closely linked to the global deep state. So they can easily fund anti-India publications because it suits them. My point is, if you were to do a study of all our bureaucrats and find out how many of them have their children studying in Harvard and Ivy League institutions, when their salaries do not support that kind of money, their children all are there. This cannot happen without deep state support. That is, they will find some kind of scholarship for you, some kind of financial support, so that your sons and nephews and all that will stay abroad, will study in Ivy League institutions, and then get jobs in global institutions which they can place you in. So the deep state has huge roots in India, and which is why you find that this is what is happening. So these guys can fund any amount of publications anyhow. Like if you're asking me why is a left-wing publisher, I can tell you there's a lot of Gulf support for them. They get donations indirectly, directly through that. That happens. So it is this is the way the media functions. In fact, I'll tell you one more thing also. I mean, some time back, some of the big technology companies in India, okay, they suddenly said, oh, Swarajya, why don't you do some fact checking? We are willing to finance it. And what is the fact checking they wanted to do? They wanted us to debunk our own leaders saying that, okay, oh, Modi made this error while speaking this thing, or this kind of a thing. They basically wanted us to go and take on our own leadership and show that they are all buffoons making mistakes all the time. They didn't want us to do anything. Okay, so they're happy to fund somebody like Alt News, which is forever trying to take on this kind of role, right? They are not neutral in any sense of the thing. So they're willing to fund you as long as you pursue their agenda. So these are the kinds of pressures under which media actually thinks that. Okay, so we have the other thing. See, Indian media, because of its unviability, does not invest in hard research. Okay, which means putting a reporter to go where an incident has occurred and report on that is costly, whether you're a TV person or a print person. So they don't do that. They sit in studios or depend on wire service agencies, which then publish these things. So this is what is going on. Why you see most TV channels are based on studio shows and not about real reporting. Very few people actually go and check all sides, talk to 10 people before they write a report. So they're happy to pursue an ideological line, and this is easy to do in this thing. So this is the kind of fundamental thing. The only media companies that are fundamentally viable are the ones which have other sources of revenue, which means there's somebody once quipped that media is not fourth estate, but real estate. In the Nehru-Gandhi era, lots of big media houses got cheap land and properties, which when rented out, actually give you a huge source of cash flows and incomes, which then subsidizes the newspaper. So whether you look at the Statesman, which hardly sells any copy in Delhi, but it has a huge building there from which it earns revenue. Similarly, the Express building in Nariman Point, the Hindustan Times building in Barakhamba Road, the Times of India, all those things, and all the Bahadur Shah Zafar Marg buildings that where all the media houses are there, those are all living on rentals given to others. Okay, like there is how many of you know that there is a paper called the Free Press Journal in Bombay, right? It prints about a limited number of 5,000 copies, but they own a 25 or 30-story building in Nariman Point, which gives them crores in revenue. The reason why they even publish the paper is that is the condition on which that cheap land and property was given. So they will keep printing it as and subsidize it. Doesn't matter. They keep only 5 staff, but it will be printed every day. But the purpose is to fund yourself through real estate, not through nothing. So these are the circumstances in which media operates, and right-wing media, particularly since it's been late to the table, we didn't get any of the early, real estate donations from government, and they wouldn't have given it even if you were there, for the simple reason that till almost 6 years ago, it was the left that was ruling this country, and they ruled academics, they ruled everything. So they basically controlled the purse strings of the state on almost every kind of this thing. So we have a bad this thing. So I thought I will take a small pause at this stage. In case somebody has questions, then I'll go to the second part of my discussion, so that in case you have any questions that you feel that are important at this stage, I can discuss. Then I'll talk for 10 more minutes, and then we can have some more questions. Is that okay, Giridhar?
You can carry on, sir. See, essentially, we don't want to, break your thought process. What happens is if they ask a question, probably we divert into something else,
Yeah.
So once your thought process is complete, then we can revisit.
Okay. Right. So the other thing that seriously compromises media and makes it more left-oriented is largely English media. It is not the regional media that necessarily tends to be so biased against Hindus and dharmic thought processes, because they are steeped in it. They talk in the language of mostly dharmic ideas, right? But if you look at the English media, one is it's highly dominated by what I would call Brahmin guilt. That is, that you created a caste system that created a problem and things like that. And people are feeding that guilt. So they have actually turned so strongly against Hinduism that they are talking as though there is nothing good in this dharmic system, whatever it is. And that the only thing we invented was caste. And that is where, look at a name like Siddharth Varadarajan. He is a Brahmin kid. Look at every single leader of the left political class. I mean, Bhattacharya, Mukherjee, Chatterjee, these are all Brahmins. Namboodiripad. There are only Brahmins at the top in all the political parties, in all the English media. Now they are operating from a sense of deep Brahmin guilt over caste system. Okay, so they have chosen the alternative of abusing our system and making sure there's some kind of prayaschitta or whatever that they think they're doing, that they can speak untruths in order to feel that themselves they're free from guilt for whatever mistakes they think we made with the caste system in the past, and we may continue to do so. The second point I would also like to say is, unlike dharmics, I think the Abrahamics invest heavily in very long-term investments in the media. Okay, if today you go to any journalism school, you will find a hell of a lot of Christian and thing, and increasingly also Muslim. Okay, Muslim didn't go much into it, but now they have just started coming into it. Okay, Christians dominate the English media for a very simple reason. They came with a good understanding of English, and the church supports that English training program. They discourage local languages, and they, by and large, send a lot of people to learn English, become journalists. Because once you're a part of a journalistic structure in any company, any media company, then automatically that media company has to become very neutral in its approach to everything, because you have all kinds of diversity inside the workplace. So this they do very, very substantially. Whereas Hindus went into all the technology professions. What happens? Because they're very bright guys, they immediately send their kids to IIT, IIM and all that. They all became very wealthy. But they did not dominate the humanities and journalism and media, which is why all the duffers are sitting there in JNU, while the intelligent guys have gone and created technology giants and other things, and they're helping the Googles of the world, who have a vested interest in colonizing you, right? So what has happened is, this is the tragedy of our thing, that the people who are most likely to have become very valuable members of of dharmic society and thinking, they went into the technology and really useful professions in terms of building things. Whereas the guys who are into destroying things, people who couldn't do all that well in studies or who couldn't, they went into the humanities and they spent 15, 20 years in JNU doing a doctoral thesis on parasitic behavior among some caste group or some such thing, and they will do this for 15 years. They'll stay there and do this. This is your problem, that the left finds it easily. I'll give you another thing. A relative of mine, actually very bright. Okay. Now, she got a scholarship from one of the foreign universities. But what is the condition? The condition was that the research should focus on marginalized Muslims and Dalits in India. I mean, the topic was given to her. If that was the topic, then they were happy to fund her study and research. So you're focusing only on the negatives in India, and this is how they build the ability to actually keep doing this. And this is something. So my point is, the deep state has got deep arms. They have a very long-term strategy, unlike us. And I'm sorry to say, people like us do not think long-term. We think that we have very dismissive things, like saying, oh, we have survived 5,000 years, so I think we will see these guys off. No, they have been thinking 5,000 years. We've been thinking of the current and now. Okay, the church is 1,600 years old, you know. So they may be steeped in pedophilia and other things, but the church as an institution is very strong. Okay, they can write off something. But here, one guru does something silly with some woman and the entire thing gets destroyed. Okay, we have created institutions which crumble very fast, which can actually are too single individual dominated, which do not create proper succession strategies, which do not think how do I sustain till the 22nd centuries. These guys start 2000 years ago and say, how do I sustain this in the next 2000 years? That's the way they think. Okay. And we think of the here and now. How do I make money today? How do I do this? How do I think? I mean, just because we've been lucky in the past because our dharmic systems protected us and our enemies did not know how to destroy you. Now what they have spent the last 300 years of colonial and post-colonial rule studying you, studying every single weakness of yours. And you can see the Joshua project. I mean, the website shows exactly how they have sliced and diced India, how to set one community against the other, how to target this community for conversion, how to turn one brother against another. They know what they have to do, and they are doing it consistently. Whereas we say, oh, what, we have been there for 5,000 years, we'll continue. This is the kind of chalta hai attitude that we have made popular, and we think that just because we didn't get destroyed in the last 5,000 years, we will not get destroyed in the next 50 or 100 years. Unfortunately, the pace of change accelerates, and in this, media also will play a very big role, because media also needs to start giving the other side. We have started doing some things in social media, and people like Shefali and all have been doing a courageous job. We have, luckily for us, I think we took to social media earlier than the left. So we still have a very strong voice on social media. But in the mainstream media, which has much higher credibility, whether it is in print or TV or even well-known digital platforms, we do not have the kind of presence or the long-term sustaining strategy that will help you change the narrative. And if India has to grow, and not only that, and I think we have also, I think I'm sorry to say that we have made huge mistakes in our economic strategy in the last 5-6 years. Often with the best of motives, but not with any long-term strategy in mind. We have done, for example, we have destroyed a lot of our small and medium businesses. I understand the need for shifting from corruption and black money to white money and clean transactions, but that has to be a process, right? The change has to start slowly and it has to be done. I mean, what was the advice that Chanakya received from that old woman? He says, don't attack a problem from the middle. Try and attack it from the side, start making changes at the edges, and then go to the center, right? Here we have tried to start attacking the problem of black money and corruption right from the middle. And we are facing a blowback from the economy and entrepreneurs who are now finding that they can't do anything. They're stuck. They don't have money. They can't restart their businesses. So when you're signaling a shift from say, a largely corrupt society or a less corrupt society, it has to be done in stages and calibrated so that people get time to adjust mentally and physically to change their habits and behaviors. But we have not done that. And this government has made those kind of mistakes. And the media is happy to capitalize on it and say, oh, you ran the economy into the ground. Yeah, but this is what will happen if you do this. So unfortunately, the media does not understand economics, so they don't know how to attack the government. That is what is saving this government from even worse attacks. But we know what is happening. We know what is doing wrong. But I wish our own people would listen, build ecosystem, learn to listen to good advice from media and well-wishers, and not be driven purely by what your critics say. Because if you're going to be driven by what your critics say, you will make more mistakes because the critics want you to fail. Like, for example, one of the things we do, I think we got the first 30, 40 days of the lockdown probably correct, because we know that our healthcare system is a shambles. So it takes you 30, 40 days to gear it up to meet the challenges of dealing with COVID-19, right? So that part of it is right. Now you have to revive the economy. Now that is where they don't know. It is like Abhimanyu, who knows right to go into the Chakravyuh, but he doesn't know how to come out. Huh? This is our typical Abhimanyu problem. That is, you heard how to get into the middle of the Chakravyuh, but you didn't know how to get out. Now, in this fight, we know how to get into it. We know how to stop the pandemic from suddenly multiplying into 1 million cases in 2 months. We have done that. Now we don't know how to get out of it. Now here again, the media knows even less, economists know even less, and the government needs to actually start calibrating an exit strategy, which they are still struggling to do so. They think they can calibrate, but in a complex adaptive system like an Indian economy, where supply chains are deep, personalized, go across formal and informal sectors, you can't calibrate anything. You have to start letting it go so that people buy it. Like, for example, they say green zones, you can start production. Maruti may be in the green zone, but every one of its suppliers may be in an orange zone or a red zone. How can you supply a car without one part which is in the red zone? So you cannot calibrate anything like this. Calibration is not something that human beings can do because it is an organic chain. And organic chains take their own time to recalibrate themselves. They cannot be calibrated because one Ministry of Home Affairs says, okay, open sesame, you can now open all automobile units. It doesn't happen like that. So they don't seem to understand this basic. And media also doesn't understand. We are saying repeatedly, and some very good people like Anant Raghaveshwar and all are saying that you need to do certain things. But I think the government is more driven by what its critics say than what its friends say. So let's hope that this changes. So with that, I will say that, okay, we have huge challenges, but we are up to it. We have a lot of dedicated people. We hope that the narrative comes changing. It would help if the government realizes who its friends are and who its enemies are. It knows its enemies, but it is currently getting pushed more by its enemies than being helped by its friends. And of course, we know that many of you are all well-wishers of publications like Swarajya or Op India or whatever it is. We please do continue, because it is from the small voice that we can ultimately become a roar. And I hope that you can do all the things that will help us gain traction, not only in these people, but all over the world. If you want to be a Vishwa Guru, you must first learn to grow your own voice in your own land, the land of our forefathers, the land of the land of Mother India. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jagannathan-ji. I think nobody could have put it so straight and so clear in terms of the reality that is on the media side. It was an excellent presentation, sir. But then, just before we open up for the questions, how do you see this going forward? In terms of not just the challenges between the people who are siding with the dharmic viewpoint and the people who are not supporting it or whatever it is, that part, how do you see panning out? And more importantly, from print media, we came to electronic media, into social media. How do you see this whole transformation happening in the generation to come? How do you see this going? And like what you said, in the social media, we are probably the first movers. So if the changes are happening in a certain direction, probably we'll caution and warn and advise our people to be ready for the next thing that's going to happen. How do you see this whole thing panning out?
Yeah, in many ways, I think social media gave us a voice, but I think it gave us a voice a little too soon, because what really happens is that social media makes it very easy to voice whatever is in your mind without any kind of restraint, right? So what it happens is it has woken up our enemies faster than it has woken up our own people. Basically, what has happened is now everybody sees that we are a force, and that the vast majority of people think quite differently from the Lutyens' left illiberal ecosystem. But so they are actually preparing for the next battle, whereas we are preparing for the next tweet. So we need to change our time horizons. Things will change. We know that truth will prevail, but we have to be ready for the fact that this is a multi-generational project. Don't think that the left did not come into dominance all of a sudden. It started in Nehru's time, when he was marginally moved towards the left. Then during Indira Gandhi's time, when Nurul Hassal and others changed the education system and moved it precisely to the left, and all media organizations became left oriented through support for Garibi Hatao and other things. So this has actually taken them a hell of a lot of time. It has taken them 50, 60 years to actually achieve this kind of dominance of the narrative. And of course, they are supported by the West. India has a different challenge, and while it may not take us 60 years to grow our voices to the same level, but it is not something that's going to happen in 5 years or during the term of one government or two. We need to invest for the long term, and we have to be willing to make sacrifices for that, both at the individual level and at the institutional
level. While I understand that it's not a one government job, and what's happened in the last 60, 70 years, it's not going to happen overnight. Still, the pace of change that happens is faster than what it was before, right?
Yes.
So given that, I don't think we can continue to say that it took 70 years for this ecosystem, so give me 70 years before I change.
No.
Right. So given that, how do you view the last 6 years? I know everything cannot be changed in 6 years, but do you see significant missteps or things which are the low-hanging fruit, or like what you said, the old women's advice, the periphery which should have been attacked, we missed attacking it? Where do you think we missed the bus, or we made some mistakes?
I think we missed a lot of opportunities. I think the point is, you should never attack old existing institutions which anyway will there. All you needed to do was create parallel institutions with government support, which nobody could have opposed. No, what stopped you from starting a Vedic university or a Indian School of Journalism, which is highly oriented towards Dharmic ideas and all? Nobody would have opposed you if you set up a new thing. If the minute you say, I am going to change JNU, changing behaviors in set patterns is far more difficult. Human beings do not change their minds. It is said, psychology says that people make up their minds about whether they like somebody or not within a few seconds of saying them. And it's very difficult to change somebody's mind positively once something is said. So institutions don't change that fast. So would have been far better to create institutions. You spend thousands of crores on all kinds of things. What stopped you from giving 10 universities about 500 crores each and say, look, and start on this thing and put the right people on top? They would have generated, by now, we would have generated a very strong ecosystem that would have been supportive of all these things. But we didn't do that. That is the missed opportunity. They are belatedly recognizing that, but sitting in Nehruvian institutions and putting the odd Sanghi there is not going to change, because the deep state in that institution is not going to change.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have seen that happening in ICHR, for instance.
Yes.
We put our man on top, but nothing happened.
No, it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Fine. Perfect. I think let's open up for the questions, and then we will see. We'll take it from there. Rajesh ji, please go ahead. We have unmuted you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Your end, yeah.
So thank you, Jagannath Garu, and thank you, Giridhar Garu. And I have a couple of questions. And one of the most heard statement wherever we go is government is not listening to us, quote unquote, not listening us. That is there always. I don't know whom government is actually listening and what they are actually doing. And one this thing is, when we actually talked about finance and money for the media houses, most of the people, those who are actually suggesting that election should be funded by the government. So why not we do such kind of a thing? Media should be funded by the government to give the proper news. But of course, anyway, some of the media is actually supported by the government in terms of providing land and real estate, what you have mentioned, and ads. Certain percentage of ads should go to certain media houses. That is there. But beyond that, can we actually suggest to control the corruption within the media by available making some kind of a government funding? Is one question. Second is media is you said media is controlled by politicians or business people most of the time, and how to trust the media and how to trust the news or what we are actually reading, whether it is a print media or electronic media or for the same thing, the social media also.
Yeah.
These are two questions. And one more thing is, you have mentioned that some leftist media is getting funded by the bad business, and I think all the business are not bad and all the business is not good. So if we approach properly, there is always a chance that we get some kind of a funding or some kind of a advertisement revenue from the business, because everybody is not bad and everybody is not good. Everybody is doing some kind of a bad things. If we are able to do that, we can actually get the funding. That's what I feel. And major these things are these two, sir. Thank you very much.
So, two, three things. One is your first statement saying that why is the government not listening to the right people and all that? The reason is very simple. As of now, the number of the pressure groups, see, governments operate on the basis of whose vote they can get. So till they feel that our voices are strong enough, they'll not listen to us, because for them it's important to get elected. Second thing, when it comes to funding, it is a long-term process. You're not going to get funding immediately. You got to establish your credentials and you got to take a long time. I think government funding is not needed for media. That much I can tell you that much. It is, only thing is we need public spirited individuals and also say some companies which believe in a certain ideology to do that. Okay, so we don't need a huge amount of money. Media does not need huge amount of money. But even that limited amounts are not really available currently to so-called dharmic media. Okay, these are all almost like mom and pop shops which are run with very few people, some 4 or 5 people in one place. We are at least reasonably large with 25 to 30 people. But even we have had to have salary cuts as soon as this lockdown started, because this thing, many of us work without any kind of pay. So the point is, I don't think Indian businessmen are necessarily as generous as you think they are. I think they are happy to contribute to temple causes and other things, but they don't think of the long-term institutions that they need to build. They don't do that. I mean, I have not seen too many of them there. I mean, if you know some of them, let me know. I am happy to meet them, fall at their feet, and do Shashtang Pranam before I do anything. I am perfectly this thing. But one thing is that I don't have an issue. I don't see this as something that needs to succeed in 1 year or 2 years. This project will outlive my life, and it is going to succeed because we are going to sweat blood over it, and we'll make sure that it is a long-term success, no matter who funds or who refuses to fund it. So it will happen. But once you establish your credibility, you will get the funding. So we are not looking for government funds at all, because once you have government funds, then you will have to follow their policies. We don't want to do that. We want to be independent. That means that we have to build our credibility independently, and good people who want to contribute and who feel it's a good cause will come in. But it's a matter of time. It takes time.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Next is Krishnan ji. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Jackie ji, namaste.
Namaste.
I have a couple of questions. You alluded to in a small way, but what I want to ask you is, how does money influence the narrative coming out of the the anchors and the so-called Lutyens, so-called quote-unquote independent journalists, and you know who I am talking about.
Yeah.
How does, I mean, are they directly paid to megaphone a particular narrative, or how, or is there at all a hard money influence? That is one. And the other thing is talking specifically about our great Varda. As an American national, how is he allowed to run a news portal? And do you think the government is particularly aware of that, or they are all living in La La Land?
No. So two things. One thing is, I don't think it's necessary for a journalist to be directly corrupt or taking bribes in order to have his view. See, let's not forget that it's in his own economic interest to back a certain ideology. See, if you want your son to be educated in Harvard and you expect that somebody will fund it, then you have a certain view that they would want you to publish, right? Secondly, if various governments and all advertising revenues have to come, then you will broadly follow the policies indicated in the back. You will keep that in mind. You will try and occasionally try and balance the picture, but by and large, your ideologies is there. Second thing is, see, if all these guys, the NGOs and all, who get supported by foreign, evangelical and even, people motivated by Dawa, that is the Islamic thing, actually, they give you free foreign trips, this, that, and all these things to various guys. You know how that Ghulam Mustafa, that Kashmiri fellow, was busy getting all our Indian intellectuals to discuss Kashmir in US. So if you get free trips to the US every 6 months and you're spending 5-star hotels and all that, that itself corrupts you. You don't need to be paid money to be corrupt, because you're saying, okay, let me go and see Disneyland while I also go for this Kashmir conference. Okay. Now that is the cheap way of looking at it. So you are not directly corrupt in the sense that somebody's paid you money, but you are getting enough in terms of ecosystem comfort and perks for you to think along those lines. So that is one start. The other question which you mentioned, which was the other one? Sorry.
About Varda.
See, in digital, there is a gray area. See, if you're a print publisher, it's more difficult to have an editor who is a foreigner or a foreign national. But in case of digital, how can you do that? Because you can always say, I'm published from US. So how does, you're anyway hosted on US servers or Chinese servers or wherever you are. So the point is, how do you prevent that? And even assuming if he is not called the editor, he can call himself consulting editor and run the place. It doesn't matter. In a digital publication, it is very difficult to separate the operative part of the editorial with responsibility from people who are just publishing news all the time. So, and you can base your, like for example, I can go entirely to the US and publish Swarajya from the US. And even if all of us were US citizens, you will not be able to stop me from publishing it. At the most, you can block me in India. So this regulation that restricts foreigners from being editors of Indian publications actually is irrelevant in the digital context.
Thank you. But before I ask the next person, how do you think the government of India needs to do something seriously, needs to do something in terms of protecting the people on our side of the divide from the challenges or attacks that you're facing in the world platform of media? Like, for instance, you yourself faced when Twitter blocked your handle and, like Vasudeva caught hold of the legs of a donkey to escape. You also, kind of deleted your tweet and came back in because you had a larger fight to fight.
Yeah.
But then you didn't get a support from, the government. Whereas even people, minions with no brains, they still get a blue tick and what have you, the kind of an ecosystem that works for them. Where are we failing? And what do you want to happen, whether from a government end or from some other regulatory end or whatever?
Yeah. So see, the thing is, many of these platforms are either owned abroad or have very substantial investments from the Middle East. You know, so like Facebook and Twitter all have huge influence from the Saudi royal family investors, right? So in a sense, they have instituted quietly their own blasphemy laws. Or whatever they think is blasphemy against this thing, and they have done that. Huh? So, in the case of India, unless you develop your own technology platforms and you have, see, China has done this successfully. All their major tech platforms are Chinese owned. Okay. Now, of course, they wanted to set up a surveillance state, so it helped them. But in the case of India, I think you should at least have a lot of competing Indian technology backed platforms. We're beginning to do that. I think some platforms are even succeeding. Like, for example, I mean, you managed to push the RuPay card and become the market leader. Small things, you have the UPI financial platform, which is actually become a terrific standard. Our financial system is actually superior to that of the US because we are quite advanced in that area in terms of digital payments and other things. We can actually move from the physical to the digital very fast compared to even the US. So we have done some things that are right, but the big tech platforms, whether it's on social media or sharing platforms or messaging platforms like WhatsApp and all, these are all substantially owned abroad. So unless we have the technological capability to create it, but we need long gestation periods before these platforms become driven by large user bases and networks. So that's where you need to support.
Yeah, but I'm not too sure if it can happen anytime soon, because when I was the head of finance of Google, we held a conference where the big four CFOs, Infosys, Satyam, Wipro, and TCS, they were all on a platform. When a question was asked in terms of why are they unable to produce technology like in the US, they said it is their, business practice or their policy that they don't file for an IP. The moment they create a product, they come directly in conflict to their clients. So consciously, we have an IT industry which has large pool of talent, but none of the IP is getting created in India.
Yeah, I think the disruption in this space will come not from the big majors who are largely into labor arbitrage. So if you are going to employ thousands of people to work on software projects in the US or Europe, you're not going to want to directly challenge the monopolies of those companies, right? Just like Google also does not want to challenge directly. See, in theory, Google can replace everybody, every, Make My Trip, every matrimonial portal, because they're primarily into search. They can actually create all these portals in one day if they want to. But they are also know that these people are on their platforms and they don't want to directly compete with them. So they are trying to indirectly compete with them through other means. There is nothing that Google can do that any Indian technology platform cannot feel threatened by, because all these things can actually be done by Google. I mean, if you say I want a flight to Bombay, Google can produce that information to you immediately and provide a payment platform, and everything is possible. Now, why are you going to Make My Trip or ClearTrip or Yatra.com? Largely because Google has chosen not to destabilize them too much. It's giving them as an option. Same thing with Amazon and other things. I mean, they're actually trying not to compete directly, but Amazon has done that. In books, they have destroyed the entire publishing industry by allowing self-publishing and other things. But now they have come to some kind of arrangement. But ultimately, a platform can destroy all the people who are sitting on it for the simple reasons that it knows all your secrets. It knows what to do to succeed.
Yeah, sure. Shankar Pandey, please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, namaskar, Jagannath ji. So my question is, do you think the present government is trying extra hard to share its rightist image? It seems like you said to be driven more by its enemies than by friends. Because I'm saying this because none of the BJP MPs and the MLAs or ministers I follow on Twitter, I've never seen them quoting from Swarajya. Whereas Shashi Tharoor and Jairam Ramesh, they very frequently quote from news portals like Alt News and The Wire and etc. Those who are on the anti-nationalists. And second thing is that there is a perception at the grassroots level that this present government has given a very long end of the rope to these Tabligis, and this. Maulana Saad is still to be traced, whereas Arnab Goswami is grilled for 12 hours. I don't know what was that rocket science they were trying to extract out of it. And like Girdharji said, do you feel that you have your back protected, as of now?
Yeah. So basically, you see, a colonial mindset takes a long time to get rid of, right? So if you are expecting wah and shabashi from the West, then you're unlikely to do what is right for you. And it takes a long time to change that mindset. Whenever, if New York Times even mention you as the world's greatest democracy, you sort of keel over with joy, right? As though this certificate is what matters to us. You have had a 5,000 year history of pluralism and democracy. And yet it is the 1947 post-independence democracy that we think we have to celebrate, not our 5,000 history of pluralism and democracy. So this colonial mindset, it will take a long time to change. It's not going to disappear overnight. So as long as you want shabashi from your enemies, this is going to be the case. The second thing is, yes, my back is not going to be protected, which is one of the reasons why I had to erase that Twitter thing, because I know that nobody is actually suddenly going to come and protect me, because there's a practical reason why this is also so. One of the problems with being a Hindu or a Dharmic is that 95% of your people are in one geography, which means on any one issue, there is only one country that will stand up for you. Whereas if, let's say, even by chance you happen to slap somebody from a Abrahamic religion, there are 100 Christian countries and 50 Muslim countries. So in terms of numbers, it looks as though 150 guys are shouting against you. Whereas when you are wronged, there's only one guy shouting for you, which is why you drive 400,000 Kashmiri Hindus out of the valley, and even India did not stand up for them. You're so afraid that you're going to alienate your own people among Muslims here, and you're going to alienate 150 people, 150 countries abroad. So this is the tragedy of having all your people in one geography. It is a strength. It is also a weakness, because in any one case, you'll have only one vote in your favor and 150 votes that will talk the other way, and you get damaged by these numbers, even though all those guys are tiny tin pot countries.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Next is DSR Murthy Garu. Please go ahead, sir.
Namaste. Hello.
Hello. Yeah.
Sir, if we indulge in aggressive criticism, our detractors are gaining in popularity.
Can you come closer to the mic, please?
Yeah, okay. 1 minute, sir.
Ah.
It is audible, sir?
Yes, yeah. Yes.
If we indulge in aggressive criticism, our detractors are gaining popularity. Any legal action will also result in greater popularity. So how do we network with the media in the Western world to be sympathetic to the Indian issues?
See, as I said, it's a long-term project. The problem is, it is not that the Western people are bad people. If you actually read the Pew Research study, the vast majority of Americans are moving away from Christianity. They are even adopting dharmic practices like yoga and other things, and slowly their mindsets are changing. Our problem is that we have not studied those societies. And where is the equivalent of a Joshua project that an Indian has done about all of America? Do we know, for example, which groups to target with dharmic ideas so that they also stop contributing to their evangelical things? Our problem is we have not done enough Purva Paksha of all those societies. We have just begun that process. So unless you understand Islamic society, Christian society, and know what their weak points are, and you go and address them on their ground, saying that, look, this is where you guys are going wrong. This is where you need to be supportive. You should not be funding these rogues to come and convert Hindus, because they are going to be doing damage. You talk about pluralism, and you're destroying pluralism in the one area where it already exists. And how much sense does it make? You want actually monoculturalism. So that is what we need to explain to them, their own philosophy, and tell them that you're doing wrong. But we have not done enough study of their cultures, their societies, to go and speak to them in their own language, in their own understanding of what is right and wrong. We are trying to, we are still focused inward. We have to be focused outward, which is what we have not done for centuries. And from Al-Biruni to everybody, they have remarked on this remarkable aspect that we are so self-content with looking inwards that we have stopped looking outwards. We have to balance this. We have to look outwards, and we have to talk to others, including our enemies, who are not our enemies as human beings. They're enemies in terms of the system they've been brought in. So till they know they are freed from their own system, you see, the problem is not ordinary Muslims or Christians. They are human beings like you and me. The problem is their rigid system of Christianity and Islam, which does not allow them to come out of that shell. Now, we need to understand that and help them get out of it. We need to liberate them by talking to them in their language so that they move out of that shell. But we have not done enough study of their cultures to really do this. And it is a project that we have to start in multiple ways and do it over the next 20, 25 years. That's what we have to do.
Okay, thank you. And next is Suresh Kochatil. Suresh ji, please ask your question.
Jaggi, hi. Suresh here. I don't know whether you remember me. We were there in the India Ideas Conclave when
Yes.
Twitter handle got blocked, and I took you to Ravi Shankar Prasad.
Yeah.
And he promised to restore your Twitter account.
Yeah, I know.
So my question to you is simple, Jaggi. I know others have asked questions about many other subjects. My question is simple. The kind of leverage that Twitter and Facebook and other social media handles have in terms of barring certain right-wing ideologues or thoughts, the moment you tweet something or you write something which is pro-right-wing, you immediately get banned. Even the police forces, for example, yesterday the Cyberabad police could not even detect between a spoof and a fake news. You know, the difference they don't know. I mean, I myself asked them, do you know the difference? They don't even know the difference. In such a scenario, I mean, are we in a situation where, because Saudi Arabia owns a majority of the Twitter stock, is it that? Is it something else? Is it time for India to kind of, like China did with Weibo and other things, to bring their own social media platforms? Because we are a huge population, isn't it? Is there a market for this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there is a market, but it is not going to go all of a sudden. You can't impose it from above. It has to be a good platform which people find useful and other things. The one thing we have not realized is that, see, inherently, regardless of whether you are a secular or a believing Christian or an Islam, inherently the Western society believes in blasphemy laws. They believe that you cannot blaspheme against their gods, okay? Which is why they, regardless of whether they are pro or anti-Hindu or whatever it is, they believe that you can't blaspheme against their god. Whereas in Hindus, there is no restriction. You can go and abuse your gods, you take them and say, what the hell are you? You are useless. Indra, you are not helping me in this crisis. What kind of a god? We keep saying these things all the time, right? We are able to converse with our gods and treat them on the same plane that we can with human beings, even while we respect them and ask them to help us, right? So we don't have blasphemy laws. So this is why when you are talking, they inherently imbibe blasphemy culture and they impose it on us, even if they have no intention of discriminating against Hindus. Okay. So this is part of their culture. We need to understand that. The second thing we need to do is, like, see, our problem is that our own people will talk about free speech and all that, but we have to understand what is called can the tolerant be tolerant of the intolerant? That question, which Western philosophers have asked, we have not answered. We have tried to be tolerant, and by definition, the tolerant will always lose to the intolerant, because the intolerant can do whatever he wants and say, I'm not obliged to be tolerant to you, but you are obliged to be tolerant to them. Which is why Nazi Germany can do what it wants, but democracies can't do what they want. Which is why a liberal can do, has to be liberal, but an illiberal can do whatever he wants and get away with it. So our problem is this Karl Popper's fundamental paradox, that if the tolerant remain tolerant of intolerance, they will lose. So you have to learn to discriminate between being tolerant with the tolerant and being intolerant with the intolerant. This simple thing we have not learned to do. Whereas the Western people know this and they do that. Huh?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next is Indiraji. Indiraji, please go ahead. Yeah.
Sir?
Yeah.
Yeah. What you said is true to the print media. That was true to the individual writers also long time back. Now they've got space to write. And what I would like to say is these people, most of these journalists, Siddharth Varadarajan, including Dasdeep Sardesai, they all studied in West, and they still cater to the Western values, I mean. And Western values are paramount to the Western media like New York Times and Washington Post. Whereas the West is not following the Western values much after the Trump regime, and then in other countries also. As you said, we have to bring a narrative that, we have pluralism, but we can't tolerate these conversions because of these reasons. And then we are also seeing the Dalit population properly. We have seats reserved for Dalits. Nowhere in the world, even America has not reserved any seats for these black people. And we have reserved seats, and we are looking after. They are funded so much. Even Muslims are funded so much. And that type of nuanced type of writings, if you people, I mean, seasoned journalists can bring and project to them, maybe they change, I think. What do you say about it?
Yeah, it'll take some time to convince the West because we have not studied enough of them to be able to influence them. I think we have to understand that the Westerners have a very good and dichotomous approach to any subject. Meaning, in Islam, they call it taqiyya, that is pretend to be something else and do something else. This is true even of Christianity, because what did Christ say? He said, turn the other cheek. Have you seen any Western nation turning the other cheek with anybody? Did George Bush, forget Trump, did George Bush say that, okay, you did 9/11, so I will try and help you with health and education so that you guys improve, that I will turn the other cheek? No, he actually went and gave him 3 slaps. He went and invaded not only Afghanistan, but Iraq, which had nothing to do with 9/11. So the West does not believe in doing what it believes in. They believe that you must show one public face of what they believe the good thing is, but they will actually do what they think is in their state interest. And unfortunately, we didn't follow that. We are very good at hypocrisy at the private level. We can, at individual level, we can say untruths and get away with it and then do what is in our own personal interest. But as a community, we are not able to act together where you project a benign face and do what is in your community's interest at the larger level. We are not able to do that. At individual level, we can do that. I mean, we can go to the temple in the morning and cheat your customers in the afternoon, but you will not do this at the state level, where states have long-term permanent interests which need you to be hypocritical, where you need to show a diplomatic face for normal days and at the same time pursue your thing. China for 30 years could say we want peaceful rise, but they were all the time preparing for dominating the world. This is the kind of hypocrisy that we have not been able to do at the state level. We can do it at the individual level, but not state level.
I think somewhere we've got confused between Vyakti Dharma and Rashtra Dharma.
That's right.
Especially after the Gandhian,
yes.
opium that we are all living with. And also, I don't know, somewhere I think we are a status quo country. We don't want to disturb the sleeping cats. So that's a problem with us. I agree with you. Yeah. Next is Shailaja ji. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Hello. Namaste.
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes. Come a little closer to the mic. It will be slightly low.
Yeah, sure. Namaste, sir. I have a very simple question. So why is it that the right-wing media or right-wing academics not collaborating visibly with each other? Because we see the left-wing media collaborating and backing up each other and then, standing together. So we don't see that visibly among the right-wing media.
Yeah. No, I think so. I think we are to some extent collaborating, probably doing it more on social media than that. But we're all very small shops, you know. So we don't have the kind of loud voice that the left has across publications, across this thing. But also we have not yet built the kind of scale where people see the need to collaborate. When you're just a mom and pop shop, you're not going to actually the benefits of collaborating over long distances are very difficult because you don't know each other. Somebody has got 2 people and you started a small portal. Somebody has something like that, right? So once you build a certain level of scale, then you will see the benefits of collaboration. Then you have the network effects coming in. We are not yet there. We will definitely collaborate, and we, for example, have friendly relations with people like Mind Makers in US or with Op India. We will never rubbish each other. We always support each other, our tweets, Twitter, whatever, and we cross-promote each other's stories. All these things we do. I mean, we know them personally, so we do that, but we are still small relative to the scale of the population. And also, more important, I think we are not yet collaborating with regional media. I would have liked to collaborate, Swarajya, along with, say, regional media, which are so powerful, both TV channels and print, which we have not done so, because those actually represent more dharmic voices than merely the English portals like ours. You know, we want to be regional media, but we're not able to scale because of funding relations. So we're still trying to stabilize the English one. But we do collaborate. We have started collaborating, and but only we have not reached the kind of scale where it is visible.
Yeah, okay. Cool. Next is Sridhar Babu from Guntur. Yeah.
Sir, Namaste Jagannath sir. Hello, Namaste sir. Thank you. It's a good session. Sir, I'm from Guntur. Sir, regarding the collaboration, as Madam rightly said, when we really look into the left organizations, they collaborate for the marketing also for their magazines and channels also. So if you look out their organizations, various organizations, they promote their newspapers, they promote their channels in every end of the customers. Like example, we take in for trade unions. In every trade unions, wherever they operate, they try to sell their magazines there, they try to sell their newspapers there. In the same way, why are we failing? Because we also have the same trade unions pattern. We also have a various being across. And I hope we have a great opportunity to market ourselves, and which we are not really looking out up to it.
Yeah. Here I'm sorry to say that we are far too individualistic. We are something like, in some ways, like the Americans, who are also individualistic and prefer to do their own thing. Other thing is, we are too driven by petty egos. I think that is why our gurus always said ahankar is such a bad thing. That's because they knew that we have a tendency to be egoistic. On our minor doctrinal differences, we will go and rubbish somebody who is broadly on the same path. Like, for example, I may disagree with the Sangha on some things, but I don't want to publicly rubbish them on anything because I know that they are fellow travelers on the same route. So just because I differ with them on A, B, and C, I will not say that from D to Z, I am going to abuse them. This is not right. And we need to compress our egos, learn to collaborate even over minor things. This is what you see, for example, how easily in Islam they promote an ecosystem. A halal system is so strong that they only promote halal. They make sure that even for vegetarian products, you now get a halal, have to get this thing. So they are so coherent in their society. They support each other. In Bangalore, where I'm staying, I mean, large chunks of the vegetable and farm produce marketing chains are run by Muslims. Okay, now they manage to backward integrate all through, and they control these chains. Okay, now we could easily do that, but of course we are afraid of being called bigoted because of that. Some caste change do work, but overall, as a Hindu society, we're not able to create sustainable change that actually support our economics and our dharmic interests.
Sir, one more thing, sir. One more add-on question is that, see, nowadays, whatever the magazines, whatever the press is concerned, there we are also, to my knowledge, opportunism is taking a vital role there. And everything is on business. and with the country, entire country is against the left idea, because they are the people who segregated left and right. They promoted themselves as a left and they are named us as a right, and people also left them as left. And the only left out ideology with the left wing journalists who are there.
Yeah.
For them, when the entire country is not supporting them, why the other entire global world is supporting them? Why they are funding against the wish and will of the people?
Yeah, I think he kind of answered that. I think in his talk itself, he answered that. But anyway, Jagannathan ji, yeah.
No, just for 2 lines. And if you read our interview with Rajiv Malhotra, which we published about a year ago, he shows why left and right in the US, even though they fiercely fight each other in their domestic markets, when it comes to India, they are actually united, because for them, it is a question of market share. So you want to divide India up between 2 Abrahamic thought processes, right? So as far as the new market is concerned, it is like, the church saying that, okay, the Portuguese will have the east side of the globe for them, and the Spaniards will go to the west. He divided the world, saying that you don't fight among yourself, you go and conquer those markets. This is exactly the kind of mindset which allows them to collaborate in India. They will fight ultimately. Like, for example, in Africa, they have divided north to Islam and south to Christianity. African culture has been almost completely destroyed, right? They will fight at some future date when the African continent is fully colonized by 2 predatory religions. Now, that is their whole goal in India. They will do that. So they collaborate till they reach herd immunity, where there is no further conversion possible. At that stage, they'll fight each other. But till that time, they have tactical advantage. It's like Hitler and Stalin pact. As long as they wanted to divide Poland, they didn't have a problem. It was only when Hitler attacked Germany, Hitler attacked Soviet Union, that they became enemies, right? So it's the same thing. It's the same philosophy.
Okay. But if I may add, I think the Hindu system of, or unions and all, they're actually Hindu. So they respect the individual choice.
Yes.
And the non-Hindu unions, they are Abrahamic. So they impose something and everybody follow that.
That's right.
So we find the dharmic concept even in that as well. That's why I look at it. Yeah. Next is Sudhindra Puttiji. Please go ahead. Yeah. You have muted it, sir. You have to unmute it.
Yeah, namaste. Yeah, it's I think fairly appalling that while on the one hand we talk of freedom of speech and expression, and on the contrary it's being interpreted in such a skewed and specious manner. I think as Sureshji was mentioning in one of the earlier questions, just the other day somebody who tweeted a satire was booked. On the one hand you have acerbic and absolutely loathsome language being used by some on the other side. And here we are, it really leads to an emotional breakdown. It actually breaks the spine in many cases for people who are fighting a lonely battle out there. If I have to put it in Hindi, it's something like, वो खून भी करते हैं तो जिक्र तक नहीं होता, हम आह भरते हैं तो बदनाम हो जाते हैं. How do we get over this?
No, as I said, we have to gird ourselves for the long haul. There is no one-shot remedies to this. Will take a long time. We have to have the sustaining power to manage this. Unless you do that, you can't do it. Don't forget that 300 years of colonialism, they couldn't convert us. Okay, but they spent time studying us till they could actually find what are your weaknesses through which you can defeat them. Now we have to do the same. There is no easy silver bullet through which we can solve this problem. It will take a long time of constant communication between us, study of our enemies, study of our their weak points, and then do that. There is no, you can't sort this out in 1 or 2 years or 5 years. This is a generational project. We make progress little by little. We will take 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. But overall, if we are progressing, we will win the war. I am confident about that. But this is something that we need to prepare ourselves. I think we are trying to celebrate small victories too soon, whereas this is a long-standing war. It is not a one battle which we can do that. No, we have to win it consistently. We will face some reverses, but we will win it because we have to sustain this for a long time.
Thank you, sir. Next is Anil Sadanandji. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Sir, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, my question is actually, I was shocked that you said that if anybody is going to fund us, that will be glad. But you have in your panel of IIT and IIM, like Sandeep Anand Dev and Jerry Rao. So, and you being in Bangalore, how is that the fund crunch is there? My first question.
Yeah.
And my second question is like from the magazine, why have you not evolved to a television channel? And later on, you could have come to the online portal. That is my second question. And my third question is RSS is, I think, much before the independence, they are there. And why they didn't think about having a university in whatever time. I don't want to just kind of say that Vedic or whatever it is. To ensure Sanatana Dharma survives, they could have thought about it, which Nehru really did a good job is like they hit the proper, like saying that education, health and food, whether they have fulfilled the promise or not, that's a secondary aspect. But as for touching these zones and considerably they have succeeded, we cannot just be telling that, okay, they didn't do anything for that matter. And unfortunately, why is that we are not able to capitalize on that? And my third question is that you are, I mean, as you are in Bangalore, you must be very well known. When Gundurao was the chief minister, he is a Brahmin. And when he was a Brahmin, I remember, because I was a child, but my father was in an executive post, that when these Brahmin people used to go to his office, asking that they need some land to set up mutts, he very clearly told them, please don't come for this. If you are coming for some, asking for education institution, I'm very gladly, I'm going to sanction land and fund it. But unfortunately, the Brahmins so-called who are going to hold the rightist or whatever we can call them, didn't capitalize on that. So why are we blaming the government, either central or state, whatever it is, which is of BJP, whatever it is? Why can't, as an individual, we can stand up and say, yes, we can do it. Let's not depend on. Why is that we have not been doing it? And that these are my apprehensions.
Yeah, I mean, see, I think it's a question of scaling slowly. You say what you it is the portal is the first thing, first step. The print is far more costlier. As I told you, to produce one Times of India takes 20 rupees, but his net realization from subscription is 2 or 3 rupees. So he has to subsidize every reader, every single reader, to the tune of 15 to 17 rupees. Okay, which means it's a very long-term game. And it's something that's not easy to do. Whereas in a portal, it's easy to scale with minimal investments, which is why portal comes first. Print and TV are very, very highly capital intensive, and the payback periods run into 10 and 15 years. So if you are willing to put 500 crores, I'm happy to start a TV channel for you. But that kind of money is not available. We have problems, people giving even 50 lakhs for us. So even though individuals do give it, they do give, 50,000, 1 lakh, that kind of donations, even for subscriptions, more than what our subscription rate is. But these are very slow processes. I mean, and so scaling is taking a long time. It's like a flat graph for years, and that hockey stick will happen after some time. So when you reach a kind of scale where you can actually get much higher revenues and this thing, that's, I think, taking time.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah. So, Giridhar, I can take 1 or 2 more questions because I have some small appointment with on the TV channel after this.
Oh, okay, sure. Maybe 10 minutes, we'll close it. Yeah.
Okay.
Sridharji, please go ahead. Yeah.
Namaste, sir.
Yeah.
Namaste, sir.
1 minute. Let me put on the light. Actually, I started when there was a daylight.
Okay.
But right now, there is not enough light.
Okay.
Yeah.
Namaste, sir. Actually, I'm a huge fan of Swarajya, and please believe me that wherever I go, I make sure that 2 or 3 subscriptions are made for Swarajya. Wherever I go.
Thank you,
even in this call,
is really the kind of support I need.
Yeah, even in this call right now, we made 3 subscriptions. Even in this call, okay. But I really understand the troubles of Swarajya, and through my experiences, I am giving one proposal to you. Probably kindly consider that one.
Yeah.
See, we have to understand that the subscriber for Swarajya is a dharmic soul. And here in Telugu states, wherever I go, the most of the English educated or Macaulay educated people, they are anyway, most of the people are like left leaning persons. So the native Telugu speakers are dharmic souls. They want to read it, but they can't, they have a kind of expression, I mean, they have a certain opinion about the English media. So what I'm saying is, why can't we have a Telugu Swarajya where you don't have to invest anything, whatever the content you have it, keep it as it is, only you need to invest on translation only. And then we can release the same copies. We need not to go with online, at least in the print copies, and we can go with a very minimum, whatever the market expectations and whatever the statistics you have, with that we can start with. And we here can do whatever the way we can contribute to that project. We will do everything we can. I can give my number of days for you for this.
Okay. No, I certainly take that thing, and I thank you for those proposals. We're trying to first start something like that in Hindi, because that's the largest single market in India. And then we would like to do that in Telugu and Kannada and Tamil, and then Marathi and all that. But I think it's every time, we've been very unfortunate that just when we were closing a small round of funding, we had this COVID and all the investors have disappeared. So they themselves are in trouble now. So they have actually postponed their thing. So many of our plans have got stuck because of that. Because just as we're about to close that round of small funding, it's actually, we have been hit by, what do you call, fate. And this is something that we are trying to go to, but we'll come out of it. We will certainly be in touch with you, sir, for any help.
Thanks a lot. And sir, sorry to bother you further a little bit. Actually, we have the YouTube channel, right?
Yeah.
So I think whatever the TV channel proposal, it's a very huge thing. We can't do it right now. I understand that. But why can't we have a live Swarajya channel, which can look like a news channel, and people may really like it, and then afterwards, probably with a very good bandwidth and everything, people may watch it. So you don't have to invest anything. You just mark that same television channel within the web, okay? And you don't have to invest in the satellite rights and all that. So why can't you please consider that as well?
No, we will do that, but it's too early for us, because we first need to stabilize the product we do have, which is very low overheads. Then we will move to translations. And we are doing small video products, but it's at a very suboptimal scale. We need to have a full YouTube channel which works at least during 3-4 hours a day. Those we will do. But as I said, this round of funding actually got stuck and it came at the wrong time. And we are trying to make amends and try and see how we can do that as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sandeep Vempati ji, please go ahead.
Jagannathan ji, dhanyawad. Thank you for this call and this conference. It's really very informative. So I just have two questions, Jagannathan ji, and I follow you very closely on LiveMint. Your articles are very good on LiveMint. So I want to ask just two questions. Do you think we lack the spine just as the way the other the faiths have in terms of church supporting various things? So is the absence of church in our system one of the reasons why we are unable to propagate what we wanted to propagate for our Indian system? The second thing is, what? Sorry?
The absence of what you said?
Church.
Okay.
Okay. No. The first thing. The second thing is easy money policy, which was adopted by the West, also a reason for propagation of their ideologies?
No, that I think Western economics has come a full circle, where I think they started with Keynesianism and then went to monetarism and all this stuff, and then they come back to the same Keynesian thing, keep printing money till the problem goes away. So, okay. So that is more a political solution. It's not an economic solution. It ultimately destroys. But as you know, in politics, how you survive in the next few years with your power is what drives economic policy. That is one thing. As far as Hinduism comes, the fact that we do not have a church kind of a thing is both a strength and a weakness. What it means is that, like, if you do start creating your own church, then you become less plural than you were earlier. So some of what you always had will start getting destroyed, will get atrophied. So that is the real loss we will face there. On the other hand, if you really want to take on the Abrahamics, you have to become like them. So we face a dilemma of choosing which is the lesser evil. Let's not forget, about 500 years ago, the Sikhs had the same dilemma. They faced the same choice. They were dharmiks who saw that they were facing a threat from Islam. So what they did, they started reforming Hinduism in some ways. But by the time of the 10th Guru, they suddenly became very Abrahamic. They said, okay, from now on, this book is your Guru. I am the last Guru. What was Muhammad? He said, I am the last prophet, no further prophets. This is your final Guru is your Quran, right? So the Sikhs actually went the Abrahamic way and they moved partly away from Dharmism, but they still maintain some amount of Dharmic linkages with us. So Hinduism also faces the same dilemma. Because it is a fundamental law of life that when you confront your enemy, you become somewhat like him. Just like in the Mahabharata, for example, we know that the Pandavas wanted to play by the rules. But once the Kauravas started breaking the rules, you had to break the rules yourself in order to win the war. Once you're in a war, you have no option but to win it if you want to protect Dharma. But in protecting Dharma, you have to do some things that would be called adharmic. So you do change in the process of fighting a battle. So this is our dilemma. We need to take it. My own view is that Hindutva needs to solidify a little more. It cannot be so free-flowing, as is, where is, anybody can do whatever he wants. Is not a good idea. Because we need to concretize certain basic concepts and build unity on that. Without that, you will not have unity.
Thank you. Thank you. Jagannathan-ji, we just got 2-3 more guys. We'll finish in 5 minutes. Omji.
Because I have to have a lot of...
Yeah. We'll make it fast. Omji, please ask your question and make it fast, please.
Namaskar. Thank you for a very good presentation. The first question I have is, why do we stick to a Cartesian model of left versus right framework in the media? And can we not spin this whole thing into a dharmic dimension? Because as long as we fit everything into the left versus right, we are following the same problems of dichotomous.
Yeah, we understand that. So please just stick to the question because we have to leave now.
Can we
precise?
That conversation towards a dharmic dimension? And I don't see it fit in the actual right in terms of that. That's one question. And the second question that I have follow up is, in terms of money and funding, can we not follow the model of the grassroots dharmic money that actually goes to the temples and similar organizations and use that as a means for building dharmic media houses such as yours, instead of actually just relying upon regular public contributions, etc.?
Right. I think the first question is obvious, that I think we are trying to move away from the left-right binaries into more dharmic terminology, but it's taking time because that is the received wisdom of 300 years of colonial rule, and changing that has not begun. It is only now begun. Even 70 years after colonial rule, we continued with the same Nehru-Gandhi system. No, not Gandhi so much, but certainly Nehruvian system. But now it's changing. We are beginning to change. Second thing, as far as the thing, you see the battle for the temples has not been won yet. Okay. So 100,000 temples in 5 southern states are still under state control. And now the northern states are getting some of the same bad ideas. You have the Siddhivinayak temple in Bombay effectively moving over. So many things. And even today, I don't know the Ram Mandir, if it is going to become a state control institution, it will be a bad thing. I hope it is driven by devotees and not by the state. But because at some point you will get a Mulayam Singh kind of person who is going to run the temple, then you don't know what he will do. So we have to convince Hindus first that control of temples is vital for dharmic realities. And Hindus themselves are not fully convinced about it. They say, what is the problem? I am able to go and pray, and what's your problem? Why do you want to take the trouble of running a temple? Then they'll come up with arguments like saying that, somebody will loot the money. It's better if the state runs it. We should not take the trouble of doing this. All these stupid arguments will come. But you have to take power and responsibility together. And we have to convince a lot of people in that direction. Let's hope over the next few years we're able to do that.
Yeah, thank you. Nilesh ji, please go ahead. Yeah.
जी नमस्कार, मनीष जी, मेरा क्वेश्चन ऑलरेडी पूछे गए थे, श्रीधर जी से वही आई थी. आप सोचते हैं वर्नाक्युलर मीडिया बहुत पावरफुल है than national media?
Yeah.
Most of the vernacular media is run by leftists.
Hey, not always.
जी sir.
Not always. Say, for example, in Hindi, you have Jagran media and other. They're not necessarily left.
Very few, sir. Very few.
Just one.
How do you think?
No, I think vernacular media is a little more dharmic because they speak the language that is dharmic, you know. English is not. So that is one big difference. So even if they are left oriented in their economic policies, they tend to understand things in a way that we can actually talk to them without this thing. So let's accept that.
Okay. One last question and we'll close it, Jagannathan ji. Last question. Yeah. Bhaskar ji, please go ahead. Yeah.
Namaskar, sir. Sir, in this media and in the narratives, always we are in the defending mode, but we are having the great personalities like Vivekananda, Aurobindo, Chinmayananda, Ramana Maharshi, who inspired the West and East throughout the world, and who inspired crores of people. Now also Ravi Shankar, Sri Sri, and Sadhguru Amrutanandamai. Why can't we promote them to show the greatness of Hinduism and Sanatana Dharma to the Western and Indian people? That's what we are missing in our narratives, I think.
Yeah, I think we are beginning to do so. But anyway, everything takes a long time to gather steam, you know. So I don't think it is going to be it happen overnight. And Hindus themselves are slowly accepting the reality that you have to learn a lot from your own culture, whatever it is. So it's a process. I mean, as I keep saying, we can't expect instant success in this battle. It's a multi-decadal war. You're going to have to do it steadily, consistently, then only you'll win. And I'm confident that we will do so. I have no doubts about it. But we cannot be impatient. One of our weaknesses is that we want things to happen instantly. It will not happen like that. It will take time. To convince our own government to do one or two things, it has taken us 5 or 6 years. It is only now they have done that. Okay. So I think Hindus themselves will take a huge amount of time to be convinced, because we are very comfortable with our current consumer culture. I'm happy to go to the mall, occasionally give a donation to the temple. I'm okay. Everything Hinduism is fine. That's your problem. We are too complacent. Waking people up is taking a long time. Some people have woken up. Now we are not yet gained critical mass among the people who need to be woken up. We are a land of Kumbhakarnas, even though we believe in Ramarajya.
Yeah, I think Jagannathan ji, you seem to have woken up quite a few Kumbhakarnas here with this talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we thank everybody who has been here with us and encouraging and supporting us. And I'm sure we are all very proud of you, the work that you are doing, and all of us definitely are behind you. We'll support you the best that we can. And, you know, we hope that the divine forces, Mahakal and all, give you more energy and strength to continue with your fight. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, all of you. Namaskar.
Namaste and Bharat Mata ki Jai.
Yes, Bharat Mata ki Jai. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.